to start with the title poem, Horsefly Dress. A long wing feather propels the stunted body of a black-crowned night heron through air, breaking apart the dried mouth of memory. In an outpouring of primordial story, I hear her name, Chatanalx, the hunting moon on Earth's coyote's eldest and only daughter. Her name no longer spoken, she turned to porous stone. But I hear her name, Chatanalx, along Flathead River near Rive, in the cutting of meat, its crackle drawing above smoldering cottonwood. Chatanalx, at the edge of river, in passing water, the embodiment of belief, she perforates the divide between known and unknown. Here she reconsiders the archaeology of our suffering. Her mouth opens in the alarm cry of a brown thrasher, a warning, brace for all that's wrapped into a name.
Right. That was Heather Cahoon reading from her latest collection, a book called Horsefly Dress. And thank you for joining us today on Poets in Montana, Heather.
Thank you for the invitation.
It's a pleasure to hear you read. I don't know that I've heard you read out loud before. And it's always interesting, I think, to hear the poet read their own work. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself. I mean, because we aren't all that familiar with each other. Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah.
You grew up around St. Ignatius, is that right?
Yeah, so in and around St. Ignatius. And I actually started out near Crow Dam, so I went to school until second grade in Charlotte, and then we moved to St. Ignatius. And I graduated from high school there and came to the university in 1995. And have always had this interest in governance, how people organize as societies, how they self-regulate, create laws and those types of systems, but also poetry. And so I got my MFA in poetry, but then I did an interdisciplinary PhD with a focus on tribal sovereignty and self-governing rights, just the evolution of those rights over time.
Cool. So you work for at the U now, like in Native American Studies department, or?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. I'm just promoted actually recently to Associate Professor of Native American Studies, and I founded and direct, now co-direct with K. Stark, the American Indian Governance and Policy Institute, and so we provide very deep dives into any social issue on reservations that a tribal council is faced with creating policy around. So it's just a research entity for tribal governments.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Very exciting. And I do, you said 95, and I thought, because I kind of went back about the same time to the university, and I ran into Roger Dunsmore there, and I think he was maybe told me about you even back then. Were you writing back then?
I have been writing since I ever knew how to write. So yeah, long time poet.
Yeah, very cool. Well, and you have a large family.
An enormous family.
Yeah.
And I mean, so just my immediate family is really large. I'm the second oldest of 7 kids, and I also have a half sister who I'm actually 21 years older than her. She's an amazing writer too, but she's a musician, an artist. So, but yeah, my parents are both from there. Their families are from there. Well, 3 of my 4 grandparents are from there. All born basically in the same hospital as where I lived my whole life. And my one grandpa, who's not from there, actually was born in Ovando to Dutch and Austrian immigrants, and he was raised in Missoula. But other than that, my family has just been in and around St. Ignatius and on our reservation for even before it was created, actually.
Exactly, right, thousands of years in a way. Very,
Yeah.
very cool. Well, I've been looking at your book, and it's full of so many interesting sort of things. One of the things that I noticed that you punctuate with in this particular volume is dream sequences. I think that's always interesting. Dreams impact you a lot.
They do, and I sort of had some reservations about putting those in there because, I feel like that's sort of just like the straight shot to your subconscious. And I thought, people are going to see what I really think about. If I put these in here, and they'll see, this and that insecurity and this fear of that. But I thought those dreams were actually so vivid, and just, I knew that there was some important message encoded in there for me to understand. And the process of writing actually helps me understand the meaning of not just oral traditions which appear in the collection, but of my own stories and those that come out as dreams.
Right. I mean, the dreams are so incredibly amazing too, and just their imagery and the leaps and whatnot. So they make great food for poems, I think.
Yep.
Yeah, they do. And so most of these dream sequences are pretty much the straight, just like you were taking a dream journal and.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you ever keep a dream journal? Do you keep a dream journal?
Not just for dreams, but I've journaled also virtually my whole life. And so those dreams that are very distinct from just, your regular dream, I have written about all of those. So a lot of those, I went back in my journals to get some of the details. And
those ones that stick with you and you can't quite shake them,
Yeah.
Well, why don't you read us you want to read us a dream poem?
Sure. Let's see. I'll read, this is the one that appears first in the collection, and it's called A Recurring Dream. And it's literally the only dream that I had multiple times in my whole life. And then when I was around 8 or 9 years old, it just stopped, and I never had the dream again. But this is it. Okay. It's called A Recurring Dream. My sister, 2 or 3 years old, is taken by a man on a camel so out of place as he situates her on his lap, then rides off atop the water. She is too young to mind the distance between us increasing as I, only 6 or 7 myself, watch panicked from the rocky shoreline of our family's favorite campground on the west side of Flathead Lake. The man taking my sister is wearing a coat of many colors as I imagine Joseph's vertical stripes bright against the backdrop of dark mountains. I need to stop him to save her, but I can't because even without trying, I know I cannot walk on water.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it?
It is.
Were you a church-going child?
Yeah, my mom brought us to church, to the LDS church in St. Ignatius with her. And I feel like I have such diversity of, not just where people are from or, tribal and immigrant, but also theological and philosophical backgrounds in my family that I was exposed to. And so my mom is the daughter of an atheist and a non-practicing Catholic. And so she was...
Separately, atheist and then a non-practicing?
Yeah, her dad. Her dad was an atheist, and her mother is a non-practicing Catholic whose mother was raised in Chemawa Indian boarding school in Salem, Oregon. And my dad was actually adopted by the Cahoons, and his mother converted my mom when she was, I think, 19. And so that was her first exposure, she said, to any kind of idea about a broader meaning of life. So she brought us to church when we were little. So that's my sort of philosophical foundation for a lot of how I viewed things until my father, who's, he's not LDS like my mom. They actually divorced when I was 12 or 13 or so. And And so he's the one who sort of led me down into a path of tribal spirituality and engaging in that. And I think there's commonalities and in spirituality generally, different around the world and in people's stories but there are also some very distinct differences. And so one of those differences was, as I noted in the beginning poem, the ideas around suffering, and the purpose of suffering. Suffering as a result of wrongdoing, of a sin, versus an opportunity for transformation of an exterior and interior world. And so that's a key theme in this book.
Yeah, cool.
Those ideas around that.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
So, do you want to give us another poem?
Sure. So the next, I'll read these two together just because, it's another dream poem, but then a lot of my dreams for years and years and years, virtually every single one of them had water in it.
Right.
And so the second poem, sort of the follow-up poem, is called the Salish root word for water. So I'll read that after the...
Okay.
So this is another dream poem, like I said, and it's called A Dream of Black Water. A sun-grayed dock, wood swollen, splintered by heat and rain, stretches to the middle of an expanse of black water. At its end, a wooden shack sits atop a meager floating deck where I stand watching my baby crawl toward me. I glance up to see two of my husband's friends walking out toward us when I hear my baby fall into the water, glimpse him disappearing into the darkness. Should I jump in after him? I wonder, panic-laced, my body throat, knowing I will be disoriented, knowing I will lose this perspective from above, where I can pinpoint the exact location I last saw him. I want my husband's friends to come and help. I want to direct them to the place he disappeared, but they are too far away. Indecision erodes as I recall that a baby submerged in water will always hold its breath. Peering into the dark water, I make out my son's tiny body facing down, slowly rising toward the surface. He is not frantic, not thrashing, not resisting. Caught in calmness, he gradually ascends until he is within arm's reach. I pull him from the water and hold him to me. As I stand, I look around. Drought has killed everything. As far as I can see, on every side of the black lake, stark, a golden desert unfolds, its glistening sand formed by the wind into endless wave-like hills. So then this one, the Salish root word for water. Half my life was lived in dreams of water. Night's long hours immersed me in standing, rushing, churning, falling, frozen water. You're asking to be worthy of something, says my friend. She tells me that the Salish root word for water is sao, a verb meaning to ask for permission or information, to make a plea, to be worthy. So much is said in this word, sewulku.
Interesting.
Thank you.
Yeah, I did notice that too when I was reading the book. So much water. I mean, a lot of water imagery, a lot of poems dealing with water. And, I think about the dream poems. That it's an interesting dream because did you know Earl Gans?
Mm-mm.
Earl Gans taught creative writing over here for years, about the same time that Richard Hugo was there. And I don't know what year he retired, I don't remember. But he used to teach a class, and it was a fiction class, I guess you'd say. But he taught a class, and he always had, one assignment was always with dreams. And he insisted that dreams, there were just two kinds of dreams, either wish fulfillment or anxiety.
Yeah.
And so your dreams tend to just kind of usually be stuck in one of those two things, like whether it's this that, or it's this constant worry all night long. And that one kind of is that, and then it resolves itself in this wonderful sort of way. That's an interesting dream.
It is, and you know, there's also, I think, common in tribal communities is the idea, very different from like dream interpretation in Western culture,
Right.
is that dreams actually are can be a place where you can receive messages
Right.
from ancestors or you know whatever it is. Yeah, so
Right.
that it might not be generated from within your own psyche.
Right.
But
Sort of
yeah.
a portal from the outside
Right.
somewhere, you know.
Yep.
Cool. Well, where do we head next? The other thing that I also noticed is the prevalence of birds. I mean, there's just birds everywhere. So birds play a big part in your...
They do. I love birds. And one of my friends, I asked him to read the manuscript, and on the note when it came back, he said, this is great, and you have managed to write about a very cliche topic as birds in such a great way. And I was like, oh my God, this is a cliche topic. And I paused and I thought, you know, it is. There's a lot of famous bird poems, and a lot of poets write about birds. I thought that was so funny, but I hadn't even thought about that because I experience this many birds in my life when I'm outside, and there's birds everywhere, and I love them, and so
you know, and the whole idea of that cliche business is like, well, you know, that's, you know, why cliches exist is because people like those stories.
Right.
Yeah. Do you want to read us a bird poem?
Sure. I have so many in here.
Yeah, I know.
I love birds.
What was the owl poem? The one with the, what was that one?
Where it was knocked unconscious?
Yeah, where your brother picks it up. And
yeah, let's see. That I think is towards the
that's
end.
basically sort of, I mean, a real kind of story that
Oh,
you
yeah.
turned into a poem.
Yep.
Right.
Let's see.
I should have marked some things too, and I didn't. But
Oh, here it is. It's in the middle. It's called Perilous.
Perilous, yeah.
By nature, we know a thing through its absence. Within this world of interlocked dichotomies, the sliding scale is king, a case in point. A northern pygmy owl, barely sparrow-sized, flew into our large window, reflecting sky and mountains, and fell unconscious to the weathered floorboards of our deck. My brother Brian carried it inside, cradled in the temporary casket of his hands. Eventually, its eyes blinked open, but despite potential peril, its heartbeat was not raucous. It made no escape attempts. For hours, it sat with wings neatly folded at its side, plump white chest relaxed, content to watch my family go about their day. Even when brought back outside, it lingered, loath to leave my brother's open palm. Its reaction so different from another I spotted in bare late fall branches a few feet from a trail. This diurnal hunter only let me get so close before leaping into heavy flight. When bravery loses ground, it slides toward fear, then falls to flight inside the mind of a northern pygmy owl, hidden behind large lemon yellow eyes.
Cool.
Those are the cutest little birds.
Yeah, I lived up in Pablo for 7 years or whatever, and right outside our kitchen window there was a big spruce tree, and I had a couple of pygmy owls that were like, it was winter, you know, but they would hang out in those branches of those spruce trees, and they're very
so
very
tiny
close, and
and
they're just so
cute.
cute,
Yep.
yeah, so small, pretty cool. So I was, curious, your poetic sort of influences. Did you read early a certain poets that you fell in love with, or not?
I just liked poetry generally, and one of the first books of poems I ever owned was actually loaned to me by my grandmother, and then she gave it to me, and it was, just like early European and some Euro-American poets.
Right.
Mostly men. I remember that's the first book of poems that I just read and read and read.
Right.
But I read other poems, and heard, other poems. And
Right.
but that was when I was really little. I can't even remember how old, 12 or something maybe, or
Right.
11 or, but, I don't especially relate to those kind of, I guess that subject matter, but I do enjoy those early, like if you, go back and you look at, prosody, it's, this rhythm and this form, and I like that about the writing. I don't ever write, and I just write free verse all the time.
You never write in form, other than you must have took prosody when you were in school
Yeah,
or whatnot.
we had to do that just as
Right.
an assignment, so
Yeah.
one poem maybe I wrote.
Write
and-
a sonnet.
Right.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Right.
But as an adult, and even in my MFA program, I didn't read a lot of poetry, and I have a lot of poem books at my house, and some of my favorite poets are Native women writers, and so I have a lot of those. I love D.G. Nanak Okpik's Corpse Whale. I love Layli Long Soldier's Whereas. There's just so many incredible,
Right.
Natalie Diaz. Jennifer Forrester, Mandy Smoker, just numerous amazing Native women poets, and that's my favorite poetry to read.
Sure. That makes sense. And just listening to you read your work has got that sort of feel for, that I've read in a lot of other Native American women poets. It's kind of a quiet, and it's definitely in tune with everything, around
sounds
you
nice.
in the physical world and beyond. I think that's another part of it that seems
That's
to
so interesting.
comes to me a lot of times when I'm reading that, those works. Anything else? What else? I'm like, I'm the guy that's doing the interview, right? And it's like, what the hell? I don't know what even I'm asking, but.
You should keep that in there.
Oh, well, he will, because he doesn't edit anything.
Oh, really?
And the folks at home, you get this. It is what it is. So, but well, just read us another poem.
Okay.
That's what I usually say when I don't know what the hell to say. Like, read us another poem, and then we go from there.
I'll read, this might be my favorite poem. It's called Meditations on Blue.
Oh, yeah.
And
yeah,
I just love the
go ahead and show
the form.
that. It's
so the form is, just a stanza on a page, basically.
yeah, they're haiku-ish sized almost.
Yeah. Open as sky, as belief, my son's eyes as a child before they shifted to earth-grounded hues of tufted hair grass, golden star moss, and devil's club leaves. 6 mountain bluebirds frozen in space but not time with the help of the wild wind. Against the blonde hillside they appear as if in a still life, as if I could walk up and pluck one from mid-air. Fireflies like blue, white micro stars blink on off near my father's house on Post Creek. Quickly, they disappear into the dark mouth of night. An emotion described as in she or he is filling blue. An idiom incapable of posing the questions cried by those it depicts. If crisis truly carries opportunity, what of the recursive nature of loss? Where is the exit from ruin? Because Kwai, the word for blue, also describes my concepts of black and green, I attempt to reconcile these differing perspectives held captive in a word. In keen self-awareness of other, she, i.e. meaning, is the reckoning found inside irreconcilable, or the irreconcilable inside found reckoning. Whichever it is, she, i.e. meaning, sometimes enters the mind from the outside, overstepping the insoluble, the wood-planked borders between meanings, as if one word or idea was or is more or less active in the mouth, the mind, or in protest or pronoun, as if any idea can fit inside the carcass-like casket of label. I read that we categorize to create meaning, therefore it is possible to change meaning by recategorizing. Meaning hovers, a hummingbird moth, or is it the real thing? Which again is it, Trochilidae or Lehuni, the buzzing, long-beaked seeker of nectar that never seems to alight?
That never seems
To alight.
to alight.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are, I mean, that is very, they are very haiku feeling.
That's
You know.
actually my favorite form.
Yeah,
is haiku.
and
Yeah.
so you studied some of the Chinese and Japanese and
Yeah.
poets and
We just sort of landed on that briefly in graduate school,
Mhm.
and but I've since then studied, and I worked on expanding Elk Thirst, my chapbook, which derived from my MFA thesis,
right.
and so I wanted to expand it into book length manuscript,
Cool.
and I wrote that though when I was like 20 years old. And I'm 45 now,
Right.
and I don't write like that anymore, and so I could see trying to expand it. I had these very different types of writing that they look different, they sound different. Some common themes, but other than that, they were just so different. And so I had a friend, Sherwin Bitsui, give me some feedback on it, and one of them was to, maybe play with the form of the earlier ones, and we just talked about the form, and so I ended up deciding. The styles were so disparate. I'm just so different now, and I write so differently that I ended up writing many, I don't know, 150 or something haiku poems.
Oh, okay.
So now those are infused into that little
yeah.
chapbook to make it book length.
Yeah.
Yeah, but those are the only haikus that I've ever written. They're not anywhere else. There's none in here, even though I did write them at the time I wrote this.
But those feel like haiku to me. I mean, they definitely communicate the same way too. I think they accomplish that for me anyway. It's just that moment. It's just that moment and that perspective.
Yeah.
And when you said Elk Thirst, I thought, that's right. I remember I used that poem.
Oh, really?
Yeah, with classes. I think like with kids, probably when I was doing, some kind of a, I don't know if it was animal or it was some, earth-related kind of a topic to generate a poem as a prompt. And that was your poem was one of the poems I used.
Good.
I remember that now you say that. Yeah.
Yeah, that chapbook, I feel like, gets more traction in the state of Montana than Elk Thirst does, and which I think is so interesting because even though I had written it as a result of the sort of accumulation of poems that I wrote in the MFA program and the workshops, so they had been workshopped and written in response to assignments and that type of thing. I was learning these different techniques and the history of poetics and all of that. I feel like those are very much they're very accessible, and I don't know if that's because it was my age or but I feel like that's like poetry for the people versus a lot of poetry I encounter is sort of poetry for the poets.
Yeah.
And it's so I think there's value in both of those kinds of writing, but
right.
Yeah, the Elkthorst, though, very much, you know.
And I like the idea of just filling up, stretching that manuscript out, leaving them the way they are, stretching it out with haiku type size, other perspectives. I mean, I like a book that's got a variety within it. You know, I mean, so many books sometimes are just solidly one way. I mean, I love the way that the dreams break this up, and you know, kind of like to change clothes or change up or whatever. You know, it's interesting for me when I read a book.
Oh, good.
Yeah. See, this is one of the signs of getting old too, because I was going to say, I noticed when you were reading there, when I was looking, kind of glancing over my shoulder, that you'd done a little editing on a couple of those, like a change of a word maybe or something.
Yes, some of these I think, I mean, I have no idea how many they even printed, but in a reprint, there aren't typos, thank goodness.
Oh, I see, yeah.
But yeah, that I would switch out
right.
certain words now that that seem to matter to me, but maybe don't really matter to to a reader.
I was reminded of another old friend and poet who just passed away last year, and Mary Laura Wilson. I don't know if you're familiar with her at all, but she was an incredibly intense reviser. She just kept revising and revising. She just kept, you know, going over and saying, nope, that's, and you know, and she'd make it better each time, you know, and so she just was a.
Yeah, I always think it's interesting to see what somebody's sort of
technique
or their criteria for judging that a poem is finished.
Right.
I think it's so interesting.
Right, because I mean, some people just do them, you know, daily.
Yeah.
And you know, it was what was Ginsberg's saying or whatever it was, you know, first thought, best thought, or whatever. Just you know, just keep going. And then there are other people that will revise. I mean, I remember hearing the poet Donald Hall, you know, say something in a. I don't know if it was when that he was being interviewed for that language series thing or what it was, but he was asked about how long he takes. Moyers, I think, asked him how long he takes to write a poem, and he said, "Well, you know, it all depends, but you know, some poems 7, 8 years." And I'm thinking like, I don't even remember hardly what I wrote 7 or 8 years ago, but that's just the difference in the way different people work, you know.
Yeah, or you know, I feel like some of my poems, I write them and I think, oh, it just wrote itself basically.
Yeah.
But that's not like my common experience with my poems.
Right.
It's more, I write them and then I have to work on them. But there's only ever been a couple that have taken years.
Right.
And those are the ones that I think are so personal that it's actually me that needs to process, maybe not the writing.
Sure.
You know? I don't know,
yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. It's hard to say why we come and go from things. At a certain point, I try to just let go and walk away and just say it is what it is. You come to it 2 or 3 years later and you go, oh, boy, that's an ugly line. I should have just cut that, and done this. And I know Roger Dunsmore, he's revised over and over a lot of his stuff and turned it out a different copy and a different version. Kind of like Whitman, right, with Leaves of Grass. You know, you just rewrite that thing 18 times. Well, go ahead and give us another one. Let's listen to some poems.
Let's see. Try to find other ones that I like this one. But I didn't really like it in the beginning, and then it was actually the process of reader review. So one of the readers was James Thomas Stevens, and you know, they give you feedback, and he's a creative writing professor at the Institute of American Indian Arts, and I could tell in the beginning, it's anonymous, like you don't know who the readers are. Later I found out, but I thought when I read his reader notes, I thought, whoever this person is, they know about teaching poetry. Like his comments were very, very useful. And some of his comments about this poem in particular, I feel like helped transform it into one of the poems that I really enjoy reading now, for the places that it takes me in my mind, that were developed as a result of his
input.
Yeah, yep. So it's called Ode to Pulia, Every Mother, and Pulia is Mole, that's Coyote's wife's name. A mother myself, I find her in pieces of every tight, piercing cry of alarm, the sharp-shinned hawk precursor to regret for one or more many times over. But I wish to unravel this inherent confusion, this umbilical expectation, cordage of dogbane and birthright strung between offspring and mother, twined into the act of birth-giving, that seemingly immortalizing ritual wherein the first mother is each one thereafter passing her blood and being on and on and on. Thus, we sometimes hold our immortal mothers as arnica, the fragrance of yarrow, each one the larkspur and lupins of summer, venerations these lofty projections, expectations to be softness, the safety of nest before feathers or teeth. But none of this will ever do, because how we experience mother frames the first iteration of self, frames all that follows.
Huh. The chord.
Yeah. Our expectations for how we want our mothers to be in relation to us as a result of that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
How we make them. In a way.
Yep.
I remember when my first son was born, that was a wake-up call. You know, it was like, okay, your work is done. You can leave now. You know, kind of in a way. It was just that bond between a child and its mother is like so incredibly strong. It's just like, wow. It just blows your mind.
Yeah.
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 Is there another one that you want to read?
Let's see. See if I have any other.
In terms of the dream poems, and you were talking about they pretty much they come as they are, and then you write them. But then the writing of them, then the poet brings the craft of how they're going, the words they're going to choose, and how they're going to put it together and whatnot to the whole thing. And I noticed that most of them were kind of a prose poem.
Yeah.
And as you read them, you tend to read them a little bit.
Yeah, I
faster,
think
like
they have
prose.
different punctuation and, definitely sort of, your atypical syntax and,
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I wanted them to be different. And the text is italicized in all the dream poems.
Right, I noticed that.
This is actually one of the dream poems. It's one I like a lot. It's called A Dream of a Darling Boy. Is this boy my father? I wondered later upon waking. He was a boy from home, that much I could recognize. His dark hair, lively eyes, glossy black, a muted smile I could only describe as darling. I am walking with my sister near Dixon, Flathead River to the north, the snow deep, maybe 4 feet. We visit as we walk on an elevated wooden structure, a sidewalk of sorts paralleling the highway. Mid-sentence, I sense someone behind us. Looking back, I see this boy. He appears to be 3 or 4 years old. He is bashful. He is shirtless, shoeless, has no jacket, clothed only in a pastel yellow short suit, a romper, thin straps stemming from waistband up over bare shoulders, back down to opposite waistband and back. Why is he all alone? It is winter. Why is he not properly dressed? And why does he not seem to mind the cold, I wonder, as I glance down at his feet, frostbitten, freezer-burned flesh dry and cracking each toe, the whole foot and ankles eating its way up his small legs. He smiles at me, but keeps a safe distance, this little boy who earlier I described as darling, who, on second thought, is more accurately described as daring, quittis buu, he dares to be. And he actually gave me this bracelet. He's given me so much amazing jewelry, but this one he made, it's a slice of a bison horn.
Oh, cool.
But yeah, so I just saw that when I was reading it.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, that's an interesting image, and the boy.
Yeah.
I mean, the surprises are not, but he almost turns into, well, for me, he like almost turns into some kind of plant-like or
wow.
wooden sort of. I mean, just
Yeah.
because of the feet
Yep.
up and the fact that he shouldn't even be alive, standing out there in short pants and no clothes and whatnot. So it's just it's transformational, sort of.
Which is, I think, another theme in this book is about transformation in a variety of different levels. And
right.
Yeah.
The ongoing transformation of being alive.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't I know? What else? What else do we talk about? What else is on your mind? Anything you want to say or talk
Well,
about?
are you working on any writing right now?
Oh, well, I mean,
busy?
I have been more busy than usual, yeah. And like I say, a lot of it just seems to be kind of busy work and trying to, because, I mean, I don't know about you, but I call myself lazy. Because I remind myself, I heard, John Prine, yeah, I heard him in an interview once say that he could just stand on a street corner with his holding up a wall and just look at people and spend the whole afternoon there and just have a really good time.
Yep.
It's like, you can waste a lot of time as someone like us. I think poets can, and I prefer to do that if I could.
Yeah.
Of course, I mean, for years you have to go to work and do your job and hit the mark and make some money and pay the rent and eat and all those good things. But now that I've got a little bit more time, I feel it's so easy just to be.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, it's just a wonderful thing to do, and it prompts, maybe not as many. I mean, the other thing about when you're really busy, like when you're younger and you're working and all that kind, you get so much done. I give it to the busy person, right? Because they're going to get it done. You write a lot more. Maybe I forced myself to write because I knew I didn't have much time or something. And now I take more time, kind of just sort of take time and be. And then when something comes, for me, it usually comes pretty solid, and then just about maybe, I don't know, 4 or 5, 6, 7, 8 times you might go back to it and tweak a few things, and a day or two goes by. But usually within a week or 2 or something, most of it's done, and I'm moving on to something else.
That is nice.
Yeah.
I have been so busy with the Policy Institute and fundraising and grants, and just the research and teaching, and that I haven't actually written poetry for way too long. And so I'm carving out time this summer just to focus on being present, so I can. I call it in here, I call it the white noise of living. It's just all of those things that are distractions.
Yeah, and I also I think you tend to. I taught high school for like a decade, and English, and you just give yourself so much for that period of time, And then you think to yourself, you promise yourself the whole time, you're going to spend the whole summer writing just for yourself, you selfish little person, even though you've got kids and a wife, and you've been abandoning for all year long because your schedule was so full. And I finally, at one point, I just decided it was too much. I was so selfish in my own heart to try to want to write what I felt like I needed to, like a whatever, that I decided I was going to go back to school and do something different and just kind of throw caution to the wind. I didn't know what I was doing. And I wound up, after that fact, I guess, because who gets a job with an MFA, right? Or even bothers trying. And I came down here again and just got another kind of a regular day job, something that I could walk away from, and when I was at home, it was my time, and then I could scribble, I could write. And
I think it's so worth it.
Yeah.
Especially if you're, sort of, it's calling to you, and you can't.
Yeah, because I don't know about you, but I mean, I used to say that if I don't do something within, when I know something needs to be done, I get ugly. Not ugly, but I get to be short with other people and annoyed with things, and it's like you get angry, and it's like, something drops, and you go off, because,
I think it's. So I have just been so busy, but finally I'm at a point where I'm like, there's certain things that help me feel like life is really worth living and engage in beauty and just, slow down the pace of life to where you can recognize, oh, this is actually a miracle. This is amazing. And you can connect with people and place and spaces and landscapes, and like that is really, to me, what makes life worth living. And in recent years I've actually been accelerating the pace of my life, where I'm like consumed with like public policy stuff and which is like, for me, the fake world. It's the world of human constructs.
And it's like and I say, to quote George W. Bush, isn't that uniquely American? Because it is. I think it's like we try to push so hard to be number one, to be on the top, and that whole competitive thing that's built into it, our psyche kind of, that I don't know if it's quite as dramatic in other parts of the world. I don't think it probably is.
Well, I think it's like a very Western idea,
right.
And I think it's, I think it's actually a lot of complex things play into that drive or that expectation.
Right.
But I do think it's unhealthy and unsustainable.
That at some point you're going to crash, or you just have to, because you have to have some time to reflect and be a human being, get outside. I mean, that's the beauty of this book, is that it does that. It takes us back to the land. It takes us back to animals. It takes us back to being quiet and looking
listening
around. And,
I feel like when I'm in the woods, when I'm away from people, is literally the only time I hear or can like discern like an idea for a poem or a line of poetry or anything. It's never when I'm like just in town in my office or something.
Right. Yeah, it's essential, I think, for all human beings. It should be. I would think it would be, whatever. But I never was. And that's why, like I say, I went back to kind of doing things that were sort of, in a lot of people's minds, probably brain dead, even though they weren't, because they were. Like, is carpentry brain dead, or is anything that you were doing with your hands in the physical world and moving through and accomplishing it's an art form. Even though it's nothing that's necessarily revered in the world of literature or education. Oftentimes, at least that's my way of thinking about it. But
Yeah, I think whatever means you know, that if it means you could engage in something you very much felt compelled to be engaging in, which was writing poetry.
Right.
I think that it's very brave that you did that, and good. And I'm considering doing something similar myself.
Well, yeah, I think, you know, or somehow being able to take breaks or find, that was the ideal thing, was trying to find a way to do these kinds of things, these very helpful communication things that we need to do to help the world be a better place and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But at the same time, not do it on that clock of that
yeah.
constant grind and being on, you know, but to just relax a little bit more and to enjoy life. The bottom line is, we are only here right now.
Right, yeah.
And that's the one thing that people tend to forget about. And everybody's, you know, starts living in the future and talking about, well, next year or 3 years from now. It's like, good luck with that. I mean, maybe, but isn't this is pretty valuable right here.
Oh yeah.
You know, that's kind of where I came down.
Yeah.
At some point.
I agree.
Yeah. Well, anything else in there you want to share? Or?
Well, I think I could read a last poem. Let's see. See a good one to end on. Maybe I'll just, maybe I'll try to.
You can read
Let's
more
see.
than one, too.
I'll see. I'll try to read one that I haven't read before, actually, is what I thought I should do. Well, I've never read one called Render. It's very, very short. And I like it. Because it's on that theme of transformation, and it's one sentence long. May I be worthy of my most embattled moments. May I find a way to render meaning from the blood-marbled memories cached inside the carcass of the past.
Nice.
Maybe not that uplifting to end on, but
good image and sort of an affirmation and an earthy, real life. I mean, life and death is the other thing that I think poets can't get away from. I mean, what else is more important than death?
Right.
I mean, to us, you know,
Right.
it's like
death and rebirth and all of these different, metaphorical levels. And,
exactly. What's next?
Yeah.
You know, and that whole thing. I remember somebody, I read it, or somebody told me, I think I read it in a magazine article, but somebody else made the story up. Didn't make it up, but they told the story about Timothy Leary's threw a party just before he died. You know, Timothy Leary, the famous, acid taker and experimenter and psychologist. And anyway, he was dying, I think, of cancer or something slow. And so he had a big party, and everybody was, kind of, a lot of people were sort of sad, and he was like, oh no, don't be sad. He said, I am so excited about this. It's going to be the greatest trip of all. It's like, it is. It's the great mystery of life, right? What's coming next? So, pretty cool. Well, anything else you want to say? Anything else you want to impart or gossip about? Or
well, I guess, one thing is that I want to start sculpting, so we'll see.
Cool.
Yeah, and I have fully formed sculptures that I keep seeing in my mind. And that's the first time that instead of like lines of poetry or that it's like a different form of art. So we'll see if I actually, how much more poetry I write, or hopefully I'll be able to.
Do you know the poet Marnie Prang?
Mm-hmm.
You know Marnie?
I don't know her,
but
I
you know
know who she is.
Yeah. I think she's sculpting now. or doing she's into something else. She's doing some other kind of art form she's really engaged with, I know, right now. And a lot of, I'm actually always jealous of those Renaissance people who are they play music and they, they do all those different things. But yeah, it'd be fun to try something else.
Yep.
See what happens. Do my stick figures. Anyway, it's been a pleasure.
Well, thank you so much for the invitation.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm glad that we got a chance to hear Heather Cahoon read from her latest collection of poetry, Horsefly Dress. Check it out. Thanks for joining us. See you next week.
A lifetime filled